happens when you've tried every conventional path to healing and none of them work? My guest today went through 17 rehabs, two divorces, more rock bottoms than she can count, and she's been sober for over 2 years. Congratulations. This is
Thank
Cheryl
you.
McIntosh, and her story is the one that a lot of women need to hear. Stay with me. Welcome back to the Shifted Podcast. I'm your host, Amira Davis. My guest today is Cheryl McIntosh. She's a photographer, a writer, and an artist based in Bend, Oregon. And she's the founder of Quanta Collective, and she is the author of the forthcoming memoir, Resilient. Cheryl has lived something a lot of women carry quietly: childhood trauma, 17 attempts at recovery, two divorces. I'm glad you didn't give up. The kind of life that looked one way on the outside and was something entirely different on the inside. Today, she is over 2 years sober, telling her story through the lens of 8 relationships that both destroyed her and saved her. This conversation is about what it actually takes to rebuild yourself when the standard playbook does not work: sobriety, art, psilocybin, AA, and the long road back to self-trust. Cheryl, welcome to the Shifted Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Amira.
You're
I'm honored
welcome.
to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad. Before we do anything else, we have a ritual on this show. We raise a glass, whatever you're drinking, whatever is in your hand right now. I've got sensories, and they're like a nootropic drink. They're very tasty.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm
Yeah.
drinking coffee out of my favorite cup that my daughter gave me.
Oh, I love that. I love that. What's one thing that you're celebrating this week, big or small?
I'm celebrating finishing painting my new house that I'm moving into.
Okay. On your own?
Yes, yeah, it's just me. I started out pretty early leaving home at 13, and I've been so independent ever since. I really don't mind being alone. Company would be nice sometimes, but this is fine.
Painting a house is my worst nightmare. We've painted the 2 times we moved when we bought this house and another house, we painted, and I was like, at some point, I was just painting over all the light fixtures, and I was like, you know what? This is my passive aggressive way of making sure nobody ever asks me to do it again.
It's
But
really smart.
yeah. So let's start where you are now with your book. 2 years sober, a memoir on the way. Your book is called Resilient, and you're telling your story through 8 relationships that both destroyed you and saved you. Tell us what Resilient is
Mhm.
actually about.
Sure. Well, it is a story about recovery, but it's maybe not as traditional as some recovery books. It's a little messier because there were so many rehabs, so many relapses, but it's not necessarily a story of hitting rock bottom and then getting saved. It's a love story and an awakening, really. Had those 8 significant men in my life, and thanks to psilocybin, which is another word for mushrooms, magic
Mhm.
mushrooms,
Yep.
a hallucinogen. It's been used a lot for people that are struggling with addiction and trauma. And through that, I had this vision of these 8 men as sort of like spiritual pillars in my life that were there to teach me. Each one of them became a lesson and in basically a curriculum of recovery.
I love that. I love that. What did they teach you that nothing else could? And why now is the moment that you're telling it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I wanted to write this book when I was 13. And of course, I have a lot more stories since then, but the book has been waiting inside of me this whole time. I needed to go through that experience with every single one of those 8 men, which seems
Yeah.
like a lot. Like, I'm almost 50. I don't know how I packed 8 serious relationships into this life. But
Yeah.
yeah, the psilocybin really made a huge difference, and so did the art and AA and community
Okay.
in getting sober. And as far as like what the 8 men taught me that nothing else could have, it was resilience, which is what the whole book is about. It's just like, how do we take the beatings, whether it's romantic or not, and keep going through life and find hope and joy?
So if we go back to the beginning, you left home at
Yeah.
13, and by 16, you were living by yourself on a ranch. So walk us into that. Like, what was happening in your life that made leaving the only option?
Yeah. Well, we escaped my father at 13. My mom and I did. We were in a domestic violence situation. And when we left home, I was like a spring let loose. I was partying, and my mom sent me to Oregon for a healthier lifestyle. And I lived with my grandma for a short time and then kind of couch surfed and left my soulmate behind in Arizona So the move was hard, but it was one of the best things that could have ever happened to me because a lot of my friends from back then in Lake Havasu, where I grew up in Arizona, that town, my group of friends all got involved with serious drugs, and I managed to escape all of that. So living on a ranch at 16 wasn't a bad thing. It was actually one of the best things that could have ever happened to me. And it was the first time that, like, I remember sitting on the porch of that little cabin by myself and just thinking, I no longer have to brace for impact. I can just be and have the freedom to come and go as I please and never have to worry about being in danger. So, being a teenager out on my own, I think the hardest part was just that adults expected me to be mature. They expected me to be so much older than my age. And so I really had to learn how to be kind of resourceful and scrappy just to get by. That a lot of people have their top ramen phase in college, and I had mine at 16 when I was learning how to feed myself and working two jobs. And I didn't even graduate high school because I had to work. And working the two jobs, I didn't have time to party. So I just grew up really fast.
It's interesting. I listen to, especially our age, like Gen Xers, and I think
Yeah.
about what it was like when we were, 14, 15, 16, 18. And then I look at kids that are that age now, and it's
Yeah.
so different. It's just such a
It's so
completely
different.
different dynamic. And the way that people that age see things, like I look at my youngest is 23, and the way he sees what was completely normal to us, he sees as borderline abusive. He's
Absolutely.
like, "What do you mean? Like, we weren't allowed," and I say this a lot in different things. We weren't allowed to have a voice. We weren't allowed to have conversations. We were just,
Right.
you're gonna work and you're gonna do whatever you gotta do, and that's it. So, I think it made us more resilient. I think it made us stronger. Do I think it was the best thing for us? Probably not. Like, we probably could have done better, and I think that's hopefully what we do throughout, as for generations to come.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, I 100% agree. I can't imagine my daughter moving out at 13. I mean,
Right?
she's in her 20s now, but that just wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. That's
But,
crazy.
like it was a generation where people were allowed to just stay out all day and not really check in, and you come home when it's dark. And I think that that helped me survive on my own because I mean, my parents were drug addicts and alcoholics. They were dealing drugs out of the house. So it was a crazy time. And like being out on my own was such a relief. But yeah, it's a totally different environment.
Completely different. It's crazy. That's a lot for you. So you did treatment. So 17 rehabs. I think
Yeah.
most people hear that number and they assume something about the person. And you and I both know that's not the story because I think most people don't know the amount of times that people go through, rehab. And I don't know the exact number, but 17 is a lot. So what do people fundamentally misunderstand about why treatment sometimes fails? Because I think people are always like, just go to treatment
Yeah.
and get better, and then you can go on and live your life. And I think that's not the way it works.
It's not. And I'm so glad you asked that question because it's really easy to get discouraged if you're a chronic relapser. Or even, if you just, whether it's a shopping addiction or gambling, like any kind of addiction, relapse characterizes addiction. That's what addiction is. It's the inability to stop. And so fundamentally, we have to understand that it's not the person that's broken and it's not the system that's broken. The system is there to patch you back up, but you've got to go out and put that work into action. And I think a lot of people just don't follow through with the steps that are provided to you in rehab, which I did not. I got back out one of the times that I got out of rehab. I thought it would be a great idea to start van life. And I moved into a van for a while and toured up and down the coast.
Oh my
And it's
gosh.
like, that was the literal opposite of what I should have done in that
Yeah,
situation. I should have gone into a protected environment where I was surrounded by a community that can help. And
yeah.
that was one of the huge tipping points for me was that when I moved to Seattle, I lived with a Filipino family for a while. And then I had a great team at the office where I worked. And I just didn't want to be drunk anymore. I didn't want to be in this house with a loving family that I adored walking around like a derelict.
Yeah.
And then just having that community to build me up and keep me safe was instrumental in my final recovery, my final pass at recovery.
I love that. And I'm glad you stuck it out because I think, some people think, well, I've already done it and I'm not going to be able to continue and it's not worth it. But I'm glad that you stuck it out.
It's so worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily think that rehab was the solution for me either, like because everybody has a formula that works for them. My formula was AA,
Okay.
psilocybin, and art with a healthy dose of community and awe. I think everyone needs to find whatever they're struggling with. There's a formula out there for everyone. It's just a matter of exercising and putting the action into that formula.
I love that. I love that you say that because I think as a society, we make a lot of assumptions on, a lot of different things. Like you've got high blood pressure, take this medication and your blood pressure is going to go down. You've got an addiction
Goodness.
issue, you go to AA and you won't be an addict anymore. And I think you're
Right.
completely right. Like you need to find, and I think you and I spoke about this when we did our 15-minute call. You need to find what it is that makes you tick or the things that makes you have joy and put that into your system because it might not be just one thing. It might be a combination of different
Absolutely.
things. And I think as a society, we probably need to get to some, I don't know how you even do it, but get to a point where we're customizing everything to fit the person, learning like everything. Like there's no one size fits all for anybody and anything.
It's true. One thing that's important to mention is that if people are struggling like I was, where it's just a repeated cycle of whatever it is, for me, it was drinking and relapse, but there were underlying issues. And I don't think that that's talked about enough in an institutional setting like rehab, where I had been diagnosed bipolar, borderline personality disorder. I have complex PTSD
Yeah.
from my
Yeah.
childhood. And any one of those things would have made it hard for me to get sober.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people that struggle with addiction also came from home lives that contributed to, that long shadow throughout adulthood that I've been dealing with.
Absolutely. What do you think the one thing is, if there's anything that the system, quote, the system never asked of you that maybe somebody should have asked?
Who do you want to be? Like, are you taking care of your future self? I don't think that we think enough about our future self. Like sometimes, like I'll get my coffee ready the night before. And when I wake up in the morning and I go out and I get it ready, I always say, thank you, past self. I do stuff like that all the time, whether it's staying on top of my finances
Yeah.
or calling people back when I say I'm going to, whatever it is, that follow through helps my future self out. And I think that we sort of disconnect from our
Yeah.
future self from that timeline. And we're so like in the present or in the past that
Yeah.
we're not really identifying and connecting with our future self.
I like that. I like that a lot. So you describe psilocybin, AA, and art as the combination that finally worked for you. That's not a
Yeah.
combination that most people would put together, but it works. What did those three things do that everything else couldn't?
Sure. Well, psilocybin was like having a therapist in my head, really. It was like having a muse. I had my ancestors there. I had entities that were like spiritual guides, sort of coaching me along the way. And it physically untangles and rewires the addiction. And when I first started using psilocybin, it was mainly to create. I would use it for art. I never did it socially. It's kind of weird to do socially for me,
Yeah.
but it was like a gateway to recovery. It opened the pathway up so that I could actually begin to get out of my set routines because it totally rewired my brain. I was sober by the time I got into AA, but I used AA because it's like a rototiller for your soul. Like going through the 12 steps
Yeah.
unearths a lot of buried resentments. And of course, the community is super helpful. But I finally, I mentioned putting enough time in and actually getting into action,
Yep.
and doing those 12 steps of AA is the action. Part of what I had to do was make amends to all the people that I have hurt as a result of my addiction. And going through that process unearthed the shame that I dealt with that kept me drunk. And so going through that amends process, even making an amends to my ex-husband, and he was like, I forgot about some of this stuff. This was
Yeah.
crazy. But it brought him closure and it brought me closure. And then finally, art was really about having something else in my hand,
Yeah.
having an obsession other than drinking. And so I would use the psilocybin, and I created ceremony around it and had mantras of, I am free of cravings, and that's literally what happened. I had my vodka bottle in my closet, but I stopped wanting it. The addiction just kind of dissipated. It was really a miracle.
I love that. And AA also. So after 17 tries, what was different about the way you
Mhm.
came back to it this time? Even though you said you were sober, what was different?
Well, in the past, I had always entered AA shaking and with DTs and really desperate. It always took something catastrophic to make me quit. And, there were suicide attempts, multiple suicide attempts. When I came into AA this time, I didn't have any cravings, and that was a first. And so they surrounded me and helped me just get on solid ground and develop a routine around being of service. And that's one of the things too that people can consider as part of their formula is just being of service to others, because it's a gift to be able to give. And when you're helping others, you're not thinking about yourself. You're not marinating in your own crap.
Yeah, that's very true. I like that marinating in your own crab because it's easy to do. And it's like sometimes, like, just get out of your own way. Like, there's been times I'm like, gosh, I can't even stand
Right.
myself today. Like, I just need to get out of my own way and then I'll be fine. But so here's a
Right.
part that I think I want every woman listening to lean into. So,
Yeah.
so many women right now are living a version of their old life. And it's highly functioning, it's struggling a little bit possibly, holding everything together on the outside, and I don't ever want anybody to sound like a victim, that's not what I do. But I think, as women, we're conditioned that we do everything. Like, I look at my husband and I look at myself, and he just somebody called it weaponizing confidence. Like, I might as well
Right.
just do it because I'm gonna end up having to do it again anyway. But I think a lot of times
Yeah.
we're holding all that together, and I think it compounds over time. So, what would you say to the woman listening
100%.
right now who recognizes herself in that?
I think just as a high functioning alcoholic that was falling apart inside, I had a very public job. I had a branding agency and I was getting out in the community and going to all the networking events, shaking hands, and people didn't know that under that trembling hand was someone whose life was literally falling apart. And I think that when people are high functioning, we feel like we don't deserve to fall apart. We haven't earned it.
Mhm.
When everything looks great on the outside. And what I'd like to say to the woman listening that might be feeling that is you have earned it, but you don't need to get to the point where you fall apart. You don't need to wait until something catastrophic happens, which on that trajectory, it inevitably will.
Yeah,
It has a ripple effect that can affect our relationships and everything else. So, I would say don't wait, get help, reach out because we can't fix our problems with the same thinking that got us into that mess in the first place.
very true.
We've got to get out of our vacuum and reach out for help and allow the women in our lives to surround and hold
Yeah,
us and create space for us.
I like that. So, our last big one, we're talking about writing it down. You sat down and you wrote this story. You wrote all of it, your childhood, the ranch, 17 rehabs, two divorces, and then rebuilding. So, did anything shift for you in writing the book that you did not see when you were just living it? I'm sure it did, but what
Yeah,
shifted for you?
so much. When I finished the book, I sent it to the editor and he sent it back with all the red lines. And I didn't even want to edit it. because I shifted internally, and the last page of that book closed the story on all that trauma. And so it was very difficult for me to go back in and finish the project
Yeah.
because I'd shifted away from my past. It was so healing. And, it was the first time that I'd ever held up those memories as a sober adult for many of
Mm,
them, because as a child, when we experience things, we're only seeing a small fraction of the whole story. And
yeah.
it's not until you're an adult and you can retroactively look back at that and go, wow, I understand my parents better. It doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily mean that what they did was okay, but it gives me a little bit more compassion and grace for everything that they were going through, because now I've gone through it too.
Yeah.
So,
For sure.
yeah, that was the biggest shift. And then my ex-boyfriend, Bo, died a little over a year ago, and he was an important part of my story. And one of the things that shifted for me was the way that I perceived him in my life, because all along I've been searching for the perfect man. And I kind of found one in my therapist, but he was paid to be perfect. I actually fell in love with my therapist. It was not good.
That's another book.
That is another book. I might get sued, but it's another book.
You can't help who you love, right?
It's right. But yeah, I looked back at that relationship as a result of the book and realized that there was a lot of perfection in him. And there's a lot of perfection in all 8 of those men that were in the vision, because they each gave me a lesson that I couldn't have gotten any other way.
Yeah. Wow, that's crazy. So one last question. If a woman's listening right now and she's still in the part where nothing is working, what do you want her to walk away with today? Like, what can you tell her as, you said almost 50, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, wisdom. Like, what does our wisdom tell us?
The tendency is to say, what do I need to change? And that is like, what do I need to do differently? And if you've been trying for a while, that's a fair question to ask. But for me, I hadn't put in enough effort to any of the tools that I had already been provided. It's kind of like you don't want to go on a diet and quit after the first 2 weeks.
Right.
And I think that that's what a lot of people wind up doing in recovery is quitting 5 minutes before the miracle. And so I would say give it time. And, this is our base layer. And I learned that through painting is that, I used to paint and get so frustrated because things didn't look the way I wanted to. And then one day I'm like, I'm just going to keep painting and just keep working on this painting. And I wound up spending 4 hours instead of 1 hour on it. And I loved it because I hadn't ever given myself enough time. And I think that that's really key is once you find your formula, stick with it
Yeah.
and don't give up.
I love
Never
that.
give up.
I love that. Cheryl, thank you. This is a conversation that I think a lot of women have been waiting for. And it tells the truth about how nonlinear life actually is. Because I think, especially the younger you are, we always think, these are the things that are supposed to happen and that's it. And it's just not linear at all. And I've been doing a lot
Mhm.
of work with manifesting, personally manifesting. I've been doing a lot of shadow work. And,
Mm,
the concept that we are whatever our source is or, whoever it is that we
sure.
are and how there's just different versions of what we could be. So I'm trying to wrap my brain around all of it, but it's just really interesting to me what I'm
Yeah.
paying more attention to. So
I love that
you
for
can
you.
follow Cheryl on Instagram at Great Things Are Done on her Facebook page. And she's got a blog at quantacollective.com. And I'll put those all in the show notes. And your memoir
Oh,
is out in
good.
2027, right?
Yes, it is. I'm so excited. And the book wound up being so big when I was done that I actually divided it in two. So the first part, my childhood, is going to be youth fiction, and Resilient is really anchored in that vision. And I kind of constructed it around those 8 pillars, 8 romantic pillars.
Yeah.
So, yes, Resilient also has a website. It's
Okay.
greatthingsardone.com, and people can
Okay.
sign up there for updates on the book.
I will definitely do that. And I'm going to get a copy. Where will you be selling it?
It'll be in bookstores, local bookstores,
Okay.
and on Amazon, I'm sure.
Okay. I love that. Before we close, we always head out with journal prompts. So, two questions for you to
Okay.
take with you. One, where in your life are you holding up a version of yourself that's costing you? Because I think that's
Hmm.
something just to be able to reflect on and ask people, what is it costing you? And write that down. And then two, what part of your healing have you been waiting for permission to do differently? Because again, we always have this model for the way things are supposed to be. And so if we don't get permission to do it differently, we might end up in rehab 17 times because we were supposed to do it this way. And instead, you finally said, no, I'm going to do it this way. And this is what works. And it happened to be
Yeah.
the right time and the right place, but you did it on your own terms.
Right. Exactly. I love that.
So as always, no neat wrap up here. I will be here until next week and it'll be another layer. I've decided I was doing my podcast every other week and we've been getting quite a bit of really good responses to it. So we will be doing every week now instead of every other week. So I'm excited about that. Excited about, some other things that are coming up. So I'll put everything in the show notes. And again, one more thing with the threads thing, because that's how you and I found each other. I did put out a call on threads. I asked women if they had a story that they wanted to tell. And I've spoken with so many women with so many different stories and all like in the same age group as us. And there's more than, I would say, 30 women on this list. And every story is different. And every woman has lived something that another woman listening really
Yeah.
needs to hear. And so I always tell people tune in because you might find something that fits with this person and maybe doesn't fit with this person. And that's what this show is becoming. It's a space where women are getting a chance to be heard and where other women are learning from what they have lived. So if you have a story that you've been carrying, I want to hear it. The link to share it with me is in the show notes. So thank you very much.
I
And
know.
I will be here until next time.